Hey everyone, thanks for stopping by. Today I just want to give a quick rundown of everything I've learned about the newly announced PS4 Pro, formerly known as a PlayStation Neo. Sony held a small event specifically to release a bunch of information about this new console, and while they did explain a lot, they were also pretty vague about a few important topics. So before I get into the more confusing stuff, let's get all the easier, less vague topics out of the way. So first up, the specs. The PS4 Pro will have an 8-core processor with a higher clock speed than the vanilla PS4s. And as for the GPU, we're looking at 8 gigs of GDDR5, which is the GPU's memory, and it's running at 4.2 teraflops compared to the PS4's 1.84 teraflops, which is around a 230% increase in power. Now, while this sounds good initially, let's not forget that the Xbox Scorpio will be packing 6 teraflops, which brings me to a point that I'll just cover now. The Xbox Scorpio seems to be more powerful than the PS4 Pro in every way, but it's not all bad considering the price difference, and I'll get to that in a minute. Also, the PS4 Pro will have a 1TB hard drive. Next up, 4K and HDR. The PS4 Pro will be able to determine your native display resolution and render accordingly. Now, this is where things start to get a little confusing, but I'll get to the real wonky stuff in a minute. If you are using a 4K HDR capable display, the PS4 Pro will know to render HDR as well as doing some form of 4K resolution. If that sounds vague, that's because it is, and I'll get to that in a sec as well. As for games being HDR compatible, an update will be released soon for the vanilla PS4 that will add HDR compatibility for all games old and new. If you only have access to a 1080p display with no HDR support, then the PS4 Pro will upgrade the picture quality in other ways, like denser shadowing, for example. The PS4 Pro also has a unique type of anti-aliasing formula that can be used in these 1080p situations. The PS4 Pro will use all the same game discs as the vanilla PS4, and the two systems will have absolutely no problems networking when playing online. So you don't have to worry about the community being split up. It's not going to happen. Sony is also working on a way to transfer save files across both platforms. The PS4 Pro will come with a ton of 4K content, like 600 hours, I think, to stream on Netflix, but for some unknown reason will not have a 4K Blu-ray player. Seems like it'll be a big deal, especially since the cheaper Xbox One S does come with one of these drives. The price of the Pro is $399, which is definitely reasonable, so my guess is that they nixed the Blu-ray player just to keep that price point. Sony also made it clear that the PS4 Slim, that was leaked a while back, will take the place of the vanilla PS4 from now on, and will be starting at $299. A cool new feature that will apparently be patched in later is something that they're calling forward compatibility, which basically just does what it sounds like it would. It'll make the games that you already own look better when played with the Pro. It's not clear if this will tie in with the HDR function that is being patched in as well, and as with every other thing that they talked about, they were incredibly vague on this one as well. My biggest issue though with the whole thing is that it's very doubtful that the Pro will do anything to assist in raising frame rates. It was made clear that any excess power will be utilized, just not in added stability, but in improved picture quality. And then this is true on both the 1080p and 4K displays. Now let's get to the really vague, wonky stuff. When watching the announcement event or reading specs online, you will see and hear 4K brought up more than any other spec or feature. But what is never brought up is the term native 4K display, and there's a reason for this. The PS4 Pro specs are impressive compared to a vanilla PS4, and especially at its price point, but they are nowhere near the specs needed to run native 4K resolution at a stable frame rate. And honestly, in contrast, when I heard the specs for the Xbox Scorpio, which are admittedly pretty beefy, especially for a console, I am still unconvinced even with those specs that the Scorpio can run 4K at any kind of stable frame rate. And honestly, I'm still not convinced. I'll believe that when I see it. Running native 4K is incredibly difficult, especially when trying to keep a stable frame rate. For example, my PC is packing an upper echelon i7 CPU overclocked to 4.5 GHz and put underwater, along with an overclocked GTX 1080, and I still have a hell of a time trying to run games in 4K. And with a lot of new or demanding games, native 4K is simply just too much to ask. So you may be wondering, why do they even claim that the PS4 Pro is capable of 4K then? The PS4 Pro is using upscaling techniques, superscaling techniques, and anti-aliasing techniques made specifically for enhancing the picture quality on a 4K set. But I'll point out that this isn't your basic upscaling that, say, your cable box would use to upscale a 1080p image to a 4K set. Whatever techniques they're using are definitely effective. And while it's not native 4K, the examples that I've seen look fantastic, especially for a console. So in closing, I'd just like to say that though the PS4 Pro probably isn't what most people expected, I know I'll be picking one up myself. The big question will be is how will this do compared to the much more powerful and undoubtedly much more expensive Scorpio? Only time will tell. And one other issue that they never address is if the PS4 Pro will work or will be able to upscale to a 1440p set. They only ever mention 1080p and 4K. So that's another problem for another time, I guess. But that'll do it. Thanks for stopping by. And if you so choose, don't forget to like and subscribe. Hope to catch you on the next one.